Hey there, G3XE here. Sorry I haven't posted videos in forever. Just got really, really busy with school, work, and extracurricular stuff, and I just didn't have time. Um, but uh, I maybe sometime we'll get back to the 30-day world stuff. It's kind of over now, and I have some of the questions I'm like, it doesn't really apply to my world. But maybe I'll do more videos just in general about G3XIA and whatnot. So that's not totally done with. But for now, I'm going to do just whatever videos spark my interest. And this is one of those. So this video is about something I'm going to call Glam D&D. And that stands for glamour, and it's kind of a callback to glam metal and other genres of music and stuff. But it's basically kind of like 80s hair metal, and it's about the aesthetic of it rather than the content, I guess, would be maybe not in the music context, but what glam D&D refers to is the aesthetic being more important than the content. And I'm going to kind of attach this a little bit to Critical Role and Matt Colville and the ilk, but I'm really not trying to like bag on anyone who likes those content creators, and I certainly do and enjoy them and watch them occasionally, and like the things that they've been able to do are amazing and have helped the hobby in 1,000 more ways than I could ever hope to. My fear is that they promote a certain way of doing D&D, and that brings in new waves of players, and I've met many new players, and like I've introduced over definitely over 10, nearing over 20 new players to tabletop role-playing games in general. And that's just because I'm fortunate enough to go to college, and on a college campus, there's tons of people willing to try new things that have the time and that have never experienced it before. And more people come from the Critical Role, the Matt Colville, that place or podcasts, and that is their starting place of learning about D&D and getting into it. And my fear is that it promotes a single type of D&D in their head as being the ideal or the only way D&D is done, and it kind of gives a false expectation about what it will be like, especially for their first few games, and especially the first games that they start to run. YouTuber J. Scott Garibay is a really cool D&D commentator that I watch on YouTube. You should check out his channel, and he often talks about how role-playing games and running them and playing in them is a skill, is a muscle that you exercise just as you exercise other muscles, and that you have to keep at it to get better and better. And I totally agree with that. He kind of talks about how that's why people shouldn't say, oh, you should DM, it's easy. And I a little bit disagree with that, because I think it's easy to start. It's easier than people think it is to start, but for sure, to improve your skill, it is a hard uphill climb that requires tenacity and requires a real love for the practice. And I don't doubt that these new players have that. But when I talk about glam D&D and this kind of false expectation and an expectation of aesthetic over content, it almost, and forgive, if this is inappropriate, so, don't listen if you're a kid or whatever, but like it is reminiscent of me, to me, of like someone unacquainted with like sex and intercourse and stuff, and that their first experience with that is through pornography, and that is highly stylized and highly edited and vastly different than, when you find someone that you love and you share that experience with them. And I'm not doing any judgment calls on anything, or if people, whatever people like. But it reminds me of that. It reminds me of like, hey, I have this idea of what the aesthetic of D&D should feel like, and what, and I it kind of, we need to also like foster that role playing games aren't just D&D. Role playing games are far greater than that, because it's about, you can do anything, you can be anything. Um, and it's also about more, in my view, it should be striving to get the best content rather than the best aesthetic. Like, I don't, I think that a lot of times the jovial, well, maybe, I don't know. It kind of makes like people be like, oh, there are certain D&D jokes that will say that kind of definitely take people out of character, which is never a good thing at the table, right? Stuff that's like either inside jokes from podcasts or stuff like that, or either, no, I'm saying like it's totally awesome to like laugh at something that you guys have shared as an inside joke or whatever from your table. That's part of the beauty of like getting around the table, and why D&D often devolves into silliness, which is awesome. Like, there's a way to be silly and still be focusing on the content of your game rather than trying to kind of mimic an aesthetic from these kind of high level shows that don't, in my view, give the best realistic example of what D&D on the ground looks like, and what a good session should look like. Like, a good session doesn't mean voice actors and really professional lighting and a DM reading, author level descriptions. Because in reality, like, what would happen if you put real D&D players at the Critical Role table? And by real D&D players, I mean that 17-year-old who goes to the high school and bikes over to the game store to play every Wednesday night, and says, as soon as they see the town guard, they or the queen, they're like, I want to hit on her. And what is the, I mean, they get up to some hijinks and stuff in Critical Role, but especially when it's out of place, I don't know. I feel like Critical Role very much rests on Matt Mercer, like his guidance. So without him, like, if you picked any one of the other players to run the game and Matt Mercer wasn't a player at that game, would you have the same aesthetic? Would you have the same functionality? It's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I'm just kind of rambling. But I do think it's something to look out for, and I didn't have a name for it, so I kind of just made up one, which I call Glam D&D, which is just about the D&D aesthetic more than the D&D content and the fun war stories you can have, and the realization that most D&D games are not the Lord of the Rings movies, and they're not Game of Thrones, and they're not described in such a way that you think that J.R.R. Martin or whoever wrote it. But they're still good, and the characters still mean a lot to the players at that table, and the world still means a lot to the DM, and the people who are role playing, right? That's what it's all about. And it's about getting into your character, wanting good things for your character, not to soothe your own ego in real life or like anything like that, but just because you're like, I want nice things to happen to them because I care about them, right? So, I don't know. And GM Grumpy, also a new channel I've recently found, did a really good video about how the Critical Role kind of doesn't represent that realistic content of D&D. So you should check his channel out as well. Let me know, am I totally off base? Critical Role is the best thing ever. Is that what D&D games should strive to look like? Or is, there a creative license there? And what is Glam D&D's effect on the RPG community, if it even has one? Let me know.